Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Keys to AWS Optimization. We have an exciting show for you today. We're going to be diving into how Grammarly does FinOps. We've got one of our amazing FinOps Foundation members to come and share their stories to inspire you on how you can do your FinOps, focusing around changeable environments, whether that becomes to prioritization or whether it becomes to people who are leading you when it comes to those C-suites kind of folks. But to kick us off, we will always start with our new question, which is, have you had a frugal week or a splurgy week? So, Jeff, have you had a frugal week or a splurgy week?
So I'm trying to stay a frugal week right now in anticipation for a splurgy couple months when we do a major renovation on the house. So
Oh,
trying to dial back spending a little bit right now.
nice. What are you having done?
Lots, a whole new room, new garage. It's a whole thing.
Love it. Okay. And Josh, what about you?
I would say it's been a frugal week. Similar though, we had kind of a splurgy February and January, so we needed a frugal week, 2 weeks, maybe month. We'll see.
Calm it down a little bit, calm the spending down. I feel like I had a frugal week. I went for all you can eat chicken wings last night, but it was only £15. And as soon as it puts that on there, because you got like 15 if you spent £15. And I was like, well, I have to eat like 20 now. And I feel like it was a good decision. I got my protein up. And those who follow the show knows that I do a lot of strength stuff. So I need my protein.
Took me a
And
minute to realize-
lowered your unit costs too.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we're bringing in the FinOps. This is excellent. All right. And everybody in the chat, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel you are watching. And let us know in the chat, where are you watching from? Most interesting. I'd love to know what platform you're watching from. We have it on Twitch, we have it on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So drop it in the chat. Let us know what platform you are watching from. And I feel like Travis said 15 lips of wings is a lot. I was like, not 15. I realize now, Americans, you guys think I'm saying 15, what would be about $17 worth, I would say, if I was doing calculation. Thank you, Jarvis. Okay, let's get into the show. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Steph Gooch, and I am an SA advocate here to talk to you all about FinOps and how to your FinOps journey. With me, we have Jeff from AWS and Josh from Grammarly to talk all about the Grammarly experience with FinOps. So let's kick us off with a couple of 1-minute origin stories so you can get to know my lovely guests. So Jeff, why don't you go first?
Yeah, Jeff Doreski. I'm a senior FinOps commercial architect here on the optics team with Steph, coming at FinOps support and cloud financial management from an FP&A background. So financial analyst, business analyst, we kind of fell into the world of FinOps, and here I am supporting some of AWS's largest customers, which is fantastic.
Yes, definitely. And Josh, what about you?
So Josh Collier, I guess, FinOps lead. I lead the FinOps function for Grammarly. I am the only FinOps person for Grammarly at this time. My kind of story actually started off in financial services and banking, and then led to data analysis. And then, I worked for AWS back in 2018, which was the start of my FinOps journey. My background is a lot around just customer support, and then leading into like cloud architecture optimization at my time at AWS, and now more hands-on with it with Grammarly and leading the FinOps strategy here.
Awesome. I wonder how many ex-Amazonians we have on the show. We should probably track that as a metric. So Josh, let's give a little bit of background. For those who don't know, could you explain what Grammarly does so we kind of know what the business looks like?
Sure. So Grammarly's been around for 16 years, and it's historically it's a writing assistant. And what Grammarly really does, in addition to obviously fixing grammar, as you would assume, also helps users adjust their tone, and also provide suggestions on how to be more clear with your writing, completely revise a whole sentence or paragraph that you're writing to make it more clear for the intended audience, and also take into account your own writing style while doing it. It integrates with over 500,000 websites, apps, and we've got a mobile app, desktop application, browser extension. So no matter where a customer is writing, Grammarly's there ready to make suggestions and help you.
Brilliant. I feel like it's been around for a long time. I'm dyslexic. My brother's dyslexic. I remember him starting to use it ages ago. He's like, you've got to check out this tool. It's going to help you, Steph. We're going to stop spelling words incorrectly and stuff like that. And to jump in at like an early concept, which we'll jump back to, Grammarly kind of provides you with these suggestions for recommendations on how to improve and stuff like that. I assume then that you guys have been using AI ML for a long time. Is that right?
Yes. Many of our suggestions to this day, and probably will continue, is based on more of a rule-based AI, I guess you could call it, but natural language processing. So that's what, and a lot of that's just been built out. We have a team of computational linguists, analytical linguists, that build these things out to make sure the quality of our suggestions remain high.
Yeah. I want to know as well, how long has Grammarly been doing FinOps?
Since I started 2.5 years ago.
So you're the catalyst. Just arrived to that. I'm doing the FinOps. That's what I'm doing. Did you come as a FinOps role, or was it kind of after you've been there for a little bit?
I came as a FinOps role. So when I was at AWS, I was there for 4.5 years and helped customers understand ways to optimize from commitment-based optimization to, preparing for their contracts and forecasting spend and understanding how to do architectural optimization. So, and then I came to Grammarly to be more hands-on and kind of start the FinOps practice with them. So yeah, I was hired specifically to do FinOps.
So what was that like coming in, as you are the FinOps lead, you are the FinOps team, coming in and then starting to try to bring all of these different groups together? How were they working together before? And, how did you jumpstart some of those relationships?
I would say just not being afraid to go and ask questions. So I was really unabashful about doing that, but I also was very tactful or really thoughtful in how I did it. Right? I would come from a place of curiosity instead of a place of why is this happening? And I think that helped me get really well embedded with the engineering teams and be more specific. My role, I am aligned to engineering. So I was able to get quickly embedded with the engineering teams. That helped a lot. I would say just the culture at Grammarly is a big help. I've never had an issue in asking teams to take care of optimization or a certain thing, and they kind of push back on it. If it makes sense for them to do, obviously, as far as priorities that they have, they're going to do it. And I've even found just by bringing them visibility, they take action proactively. So I've been really happy with the culture there. So there wasn't really a need for a culture change at that point. So a lot of what the need was just kind of how can we get higher quality information closer to the engineers and other stakeholders.
I think we had a question in the chat, which is AWS, how does Grammarly do FinOps? I feel like you've explained it in a very simple way that you have a really good culture, and the amount of time, I mean, Jeff, we have this in optics as well. We talk about the culture conversation is so crucial to getting any kind of buy-in with teams, and the straight out the gate, Josh is giving good advice of just coming in and being like, let's go from a place of curiosity and asking kind of questions. Following on from that, what are some things that when you got to Grammarly, where did you start when it comes to FinOps? What were your first priorities?
One of my first priorities was automating our reporting. So I was actually pleasantly surprised with our tagging. I think we only had about 10% from our primary tag that we used to kind of track services and such. Only 10% wasn't tagged. So I thought that was in a good place. And we were doing like some savings plans and RIs already and things like that. So there's some things in place, but the reporting was still very manual. So one of my first things was just, adding the cost intelligence dashboards and automating that and having that up for a place for engineering, another place and to go to see more detailed, customized cost reporting that I don't have to update manually. And instead, outside of just going to Cost Explorer. So that was probably one of my first strategies there. And then obviously, from there, just improving our things like savings plans and the RIs and things that are usually the low-hanging fruit when you come into companies. So that was kind of the second stage. But yeah, primary focus was definitely just automating reporting and scaling a small team.
So with
Yeah.
with that culture kind of coming in, it sounds like, at first establishing those may have been a little more reactive in that you're trying to get the visibility, you're trying to, identify the optimization, have people react to those levers. Have you started going to a more proactive approach with either your conversations or discussions with the engineering team as they're building out applications?
So yeah, the proactive approach is two different kind of prongs there. One was, we have a team, an ML ops team, which early on I was able to develop a good relationship with, and they were proactive in letting me know what was happening, and they handle a lot of times a lot of our inferencing services. So being Grammarly who we are, a lot of our spend is inferencing. So they would give me a heads up a lot of times if something unexpected was happening, or they were keeping a pretty close eye. So that relationship with a key team really helped with some of the proactivity. But now, we are using a third-party tool to actually bring the information to their workflows. So right now, for the most teams, they still have to kind of go outside of their normal kind of tooling to look at costs and understand costs. So I had to come Slack me. But now we're moving in a direction of, I want that information to come to your Slack channel. I want you to get emails about it. I want you to, and tell me if it's too noisy, we'll adjust it. But I'd rather you be getting this information and have insight rather than, having to kind of proactively seek it out. And again, that reactive nature, they are going to be reacting to those alerts, obviously, but at the same time, it removes me from having to be involved with every optimization or anomaly, or me relying on myself to actually identify these things. The information is coming straight to them, and they can take action much more quickly.
Yeah, getting that numbers in front of them, and love the idea of putting things in the Slack channel, place where people go. I try, and emails are good, but I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I get so many emails, and they lose focus. One thing that we do suggest as well is, like, another area is making sure that you integrate into platforms that your developers use. So I'm a big fan of things like Jira and ServiceNow, and kind of plugging straight into that. Last week's episode, we talked with the observability guys, and we showcased that some of the anomalies section in CloudWatch can go directly into Jira. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. And I just raised a product feature request on that. And if anybody's interested in adding to the product feature request, so those who don't know, we listen to customer feedback all the time, and you can raise feature requests either in the console yourself or with your account team, or you can always email me at costoptimization@amazon.com, and I will submit it for you, and we can provide any feedback to service teams. But one of the things, if you're interested in plugging a custom section or budgets into your Jira tickets or ServiceNow, then please let me know in the chat or via email. We can continue taking that feedback. So when it comes, I want to drill back into something, and forgive me if you said this or not, and tagging. Did you guys say you tagged?
Yes.
You do tagged. And
Yes.
how, when you got there, it was pretty good tagging setup, I guess. Is there anything you've ever had to battle with that? Or is it just like people just have tagging in by default? And if you have got it by default, how did you do that? I'm sure a lot of people want to know.
Infrastructure as code. So it's, on the, and we look at our spend from, we have a data organization, and we use Databricks, and that's kind of one set of spend, which we're improving the tagging now on that. But on the cloud side, inferencing, training, things like that, our tagging, everything's managed through Terraform, infrastructure as code. And that tagging, that's the reason the tagging was in such good shape, because everything was in Terraform. Yeah. So I think that was absolutely key. So there was no real battles. I would say it's the battle would be if I needed to, there's things I wanted to be more granular with, and that was going to be very difficult to kind of push and get across, especially when we have hundreds of engineers and dozens of teams. That was going to be difficult, but I didn't see the ROI from having to really push on that. But yeah, infrastructure as code is key.
Love it. It's like I was wearing my HashiCorp talk because I knew you were going to talk about it. I did not know you were going to mention Terraform. It's just happy branding accident. Yeah. Jeff, when it comes to when you speak to customers about the similar kind of things, do you see a lot of the same starting points that Josh mentioned, or the things that they didn't do that you would suggest they mix it up if someone was watching today and it's like, where do I start when it comes to FinOps?
I think having that tagging in place when you came into the role probably solved about 80% of the problems that we see when we're engaging with different customers because right away you're able to, set up the visibility better. It may have been manual before it was there. Now, when you automate it, it's going to be so much easier to get it to the right stakeholders. So the idea that you had that culture of infrastructure as code for tagging, and when that will then allow you to do more optimization, automation as well with some of those, is a really good foundational starting point. And probably the key to really make big strides of going from the low hanging fruit to now being able to deploy optimization organization wide versus just in pockets for the engineers that really want to take action on it. Now you can help automate that action, make their lives easier.
And also with the culture change stuff that Josh was mentioning, what if people come and there isn't a great culture change? Jeff, do you have any advice to people who are maybe not as such a nice company that Grammarly seems to be, where everyone just does what they're meant to do when it comes to cost?
I love Josh coming in and saying that it was about coming from a place of curiosity, of trying to understand what they were doing. You're not inserting yourself into what they are and saying you have to do this action or that action. And so starting some of the just conversations with those groups, even if the new FinOps person becomes the glue of bringing different groups together and starting those conversations that may have been siloed, that's an easy action to get the right people in the room and start the discussion and start making sure that people understand what are the implications, what are things we can do to help you be more efficient, and then on finance side to help us drive some of the cost curve that we have. And it's not something that you have to come in, with a hammer and beat people over the head with it. It's, coming from a place of, we want to help you do your job better and focus on the important aspects of what you're doing as an engineer.
Grammarly, as I understand it, had some changes when it came to the C-suite level at the company. That would definitely, I would assume anyway, affect how FinOps kind of trickles down with that top-down approach. Josh, how did to set the situation, as we talked a little bit about this before the call, tell us what was going on in Grammarly in changing in that area.
Well, I would say one of the major changes is we actually just acquired a company back in January called Coda.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Which I am very excited about with these changes, but it did lead to some leadership changes as well. And prior to that, we also had some changes, specifically in engineering with our leadership, and also combined with all these changes, we're also migrating to EKS. So there was just a lot of things going on all at once and changes. I'll say in regards to just the C-suite, early before all these changes, we had actually set up a quarterly report to our CTO, and we would invite the CFO, and he would join sometimes as well. But I felt like those were super important because that was our time to kind of highlight what we felt was most important, get their feedback on what we plan on doing, and just align overall. So having that kind of quarterly kind of touch point with the C-suite was key. And then now when the new C-suite or new executive start or new leadership starts, we already have this cadence set up. That's an opportunity for them to kind of get a lay of the land. But even before that, have one-on-ones, earn that trust, that, things that are being worked on make sense. And I think that's kind of probably the most critical part. And then by the time they get, you have that trust built, by the time they get to the actual report that we're looking at, they can trust the values that are there. They have a bit more context. Context is very important when you're presenting all these numbers and plans that you have. And once that's there, that really helps with the transition. So overall, it's been, even with all the changes, it's been from a FinOps standpoint fairly smooth. But yeah, that was my approach with all of these.
Yeah, getting that by gradually involving them. And you're right, context. Just saying numbers of EC2 and stuff like that are not necessarily relevant to someone at the C level. So making it a little bit more real world is important. Jeff, when you, probably from the optics point of view, present to sometimes people at C-suite level, what do you find is important when it comes to what data you give them?
It's focus on the most material aspect of whatever your ask is. So if you're trying to give an overview of your infrastructure, it's where their growth, what is the one or two main drivers behind growth, or what are the big initiatives that the executive leadership needs to know coming out of that room that may affect them for the next 3 or 6 months. So you're not caught up in the minutia of how many EC2 instances or something like that. It's really focused on, here's our broad infrastructure, here are our goals, here's what we accomplished over the last few months, and also here's what we may need your support on to drive for the next short to medium term. So there's a bit of a call to action, since you don't always get those opportunities to work with that level, but getting their buy-in can, help you down the road of taking action on some of those.
Yeah, the call to action, I think, is something people miss the trick quite a lot with presenting, because there's a reason why you're there. You want them probably to do something. You don't want them to be like, cool story, bro. It should be something that's more engaging than that. So how do you share it? I wanted to talk a little bit about prioritization. So often in the world of FinOps, there are so many things you could do, right? You could save money, you could report, you could forecast. I feel like I've said so many and I named 3, but there are so many different levers to that and what you focus your time on. And sometimes when you come into a business, you have a scope of what you want to achieve first. For example, Josh, you did something similar to me when I started FinOps, was automate reporting, when you kind of focus on it. But other people have different kind of goals. Sometimes you have to reshift where your priorities are, which can be a challenge a little bit. So where have you had to do that at all in Grammarly when it comes to maybe optimization?
Well, in regards to optimization,
Or anything, sorry, anything.
oh yeah. Well, I would say, priorities, definitely shifted. And with these changes, as expected, I will say that how to kind of manage all the things that you could be doing is really focusing on what's going to be the highest ROI for the company broadly, and that can be accomplished with not the minimal amount of effort, but there's got to be kind of a balance of, okay, this is going to take me, a few weeks. That's going to have a big impact versus something that could have an even, larger impact, but it's going to take me 6 months, right? But let's go ahead and do this piece. So that's one aspect, but also looking at things that maybe there are, larger initiatives that are, you do little projects here and there to kind of chip away at the overall kind of goal. So you want to kind of work those things into whatever you're doing right now. And maybe it's not something that way no matter what you're doing throughout the day or week or month, that you're working toward these overall goals, but also leaving space for, hey, this we just discovered this huge, cost in AWS that we didn't expect, or this new experiment that went haywire. We need to take care of it. Obviously that's a significant amount of spend. That's going to take priority. Or, we have our executive, wanting us to kind of put some information together for him to present elsewhere to the board or something. Then that's going to take higher priority, but you got to leave some space for those unknowns.
Yeah.
But also, 75% of your time should be spent toward those projects that are going to have the ROI, high ROI, and at least you're chipping away at all those and making progress on all of those. Hopefully every day, but at least every week. So you're not falling behind on those things that may be a little lower priority than like what's in front of your face right now.
Yeah, the things shifting. Go on, Jeff.
Oh, I was just wondering, with all those different priorities, working with the engineers, how are you getting the engineers to kind of prioritize their infrastructure? How much autonomy do you give when they are building for the freedom to choose what they want to use versus having maybe some central control, since you have the infrastructure as code, of trying to push people to maybe use the latest instance type, so kind of a command and control of central control versus autonomy. Is that something that you're looking at, or do your engineers really have that autonomy to choose what they want to use for their work? And then you can help them prioritize where there may be areas to go to a more modern instance or optimize what they're using?
So this is part of the reason we moved to EKS is to have that, from our platform engineering team or infrastructure team, they pretty much choose the instances that are being used, and that gives a more centralized control. But even prior to that, I would say the builders didn't really care what machines they were using. They used, but so we really needed to have, I think we called it at that time a golden path, a set of instances, a set of machines to choose from. And we need to kind of set that into like reasonable set of instances. And they're usually going to go with that. Now, if they need something that's different and bigger, they ask, and then we kind of have that conversation. So in times where, maybe it was required a bit more of a conversation, it's just kind of learning, to help me understand the reasoning behind this. And, most of the cases, they had good reasoning. And it was very rare that they pushed back and I've responded and, they ended up not going with what they wanted to do because they actually had good reasoning behind why they needed this machine. So I would say the first aspect is just having governance and saying, okay, this is what most people are going to need, but also having the path to them say, yeah, I do need, this special machine for this specific purpose. And opening up that conversation. I think that is critical. So at Grammarly, yeah, that wasn't, we give them autonomy, but obviously long term, especially with the move to EKS, we actually just want to abstract that decision away from them. That shouldn't be something they should even be really needing to decide. And that's where we want to be. That's in the future is completely abstracting that away from the builder. We make those decisions for them, and obviously keeping the window open for special use cases.
The giving them the kind of path of least resistance almost, where you set it up for them, I think is such a great idea. I'm always harping on about infrastructure as code and the setting it up with the kind of most scaled down version of what you need, and then everything else is a change or an add-on where the builder needs to be mindful of that change. So for example, all of your database should be single AZ and be Graviton by default. Like that should just be the basic thing. And if someone needs to make it multi-AZ because it's prod, or they need to change it for another engine version because of some reason, then they have to go and change it. The same as like sizing of instances. Don't make them triple XL. That's not a size, but you know what I mean? Really, really big. Like make these things lock down. Make your buckets have intelligent tiering on by default and all these kind of things so that there's no decision being made to be frugal. It's more about the decision to utilize more of a service because you need to. We've had a question I want to throw up, which is what are the key FinOps metrics that Grammarly tracks for cost margin?
Great question. This may be a good segue to the next portion here, but one of the items, cost per token, that for our OpenAI usage, I know that for on our inference and hosted AI workloads, I know our ML team tracks cost per token as well internally. But for myself, I'm usually looking at that. I have some reports that show that. As far as commitment discounts, from our contractual things like effective discount for all our discounts that we're getting across the board to, the effective savings rate on our savings plans. And whenever you talk about savings plans, there's just not just one metric you can look at. Like I would say effective savings rate is good, but you also want to account for the coverage, the net savings, all those things kind of, you need to be taken into account. But those are some of the metrics that we're currently looking at. A cost per request, cost per monthly active user, are other metrics that we look at. We would love to get to cost per, accepted suggestion, cost per dismiss suggestion, cost per. So then we're actually going back to what's the value of certain features bringing to the ROI. So that's kind of the future state. But those are other areas that we'd like to add to.
Yeah, and drilling down into that, and then Jeff, I'll come to you for maybe some other metrics you suggest. But a lot of teams and people that I speak to would love to be able to do per kind of active user or, like you said, per request. How did you go about, in a very high level, because we probably won't go into like super detail about it, but How did you kind of get that data? How did you suggest that teams should give you access to kind of that database that has all the users so you could work out that kind of cost? What did the process look like?
So I work very closely with our finance team. They have that information. It was pretty easy for me to get access to that. And I would say our FP&A team is actually the team that kind of tracks calculates the cost per user right now. But yeah, they had that information there already built in. So that wasn't much of a stretch to get there. What I would like to have though is, we have dozens of features. We know the overall users, but we don't know the user journey, and how much a certain user is using of this feature and that feature. So we can't break it down to that detail yet. We hope to, but right now it's just like we know their overall amount of monthly active users for a given month, and we can just kind of calculate it from there.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'd never thought the finance people have so much power. But yeah, go speak to your finance teams and see if they already have that data. Don't do it twice. Jeff, what about you? What's the top metric?
I was just going to call that out with the finance team. Josh mentioned he is aligned with the engineering team. Getting some of that user data can be difficult. And seeing what your FP&A team has is fantastic, because that's a challenge, as Steph said, with building those business metrics. That's really the gold standard that we want to see customers get to, of understanding, what the cost per action of why you have built this application, why it's running. So being able to set that and have the data already in there from the finance team is something that I know can be a struggle for some customers. Do you guys look at other unit metrics as well? So not just the business metrics, but your actual infrastructure. So, tracking volume metrics, vCPU hours, things like that, to just understand how efficient you are, different applications, when you layer on both the central levers of a savings plan, and then local with instant selection, or your tiering for your buckets.
Some of the other metrics, I won't say I use it regularly, but I know our ML Infra team has kind of built these out in some of their dashboards, monitoring dashboards. But what I found I thought was pretty good was number of instances per request. So basically the number of instances used to process, a certain request or request. So that would be a quick way to see if inefficiency came out of nowhere. With certain services or features. So that was another one. I would say we're getting better with our storage class, using different storage classes within S3 and optimizing that. Within our Kudos dashboards, we do have cost per gigabyte, and we do have those unit metrics. I'm not referencing them regularly right now because we're in a process of just improving them that drastically. But yeah, those are other things. Cost per EC2 hour. I would like to get to cost per vCPU. That's something else that's kind of been in the back of my mind, but it's not something we're looking at yet. So these are all things we're aware of. We're just not looking at quite yet, because either we're doing optimization in these areas and it's not very valuable yet, or I just haven't gotten to it.
Fair enough. There's lots of things going on. Speaking of kind of compute stuff, one thing we talked about before was the company's decision to kind of move towards more containerization, which can definitely be an optimization. I think people forget sometimes that containerizing things can help you be more efficient. When it came to that kind of a move, what was the process? What kind of data encouraged you to do that kind of migration in terms of optimization in general?
Sure. So we historically, Grammarly was on ECS for a lot of our inferencing services. And the decision was driven to move to EKS really from just a product and speed of development standpoint. Right. That was the key reason we decided to make this move. And this move was, a year in the making. So it took 12 months for, starting with getting to buy-in, to planning, to doing load tests, because we're working at quite a high scale. We're talking 30 million monthly active users. So multiple load tests, to finally making 100% migration to EKS in January. So it was a long, thoughtful process. They learned a lot with each of those load tests. But again, the key driver here was, they could speed up developer speed up the how fast our builders can build, increase the portability in general of our service, which that's for multiple reasons, but this could be in the future more valuable for Grammarly to have. So just having that flexibility. Also, we were now using a service mesh, which can provide very valuable details on how the services are communicating with each other and traffic, and which we didn't have before. We didn't at least build out to have. So that's another aspect. We can get a much more granular pieces of data on how these services are working or communicating with each other. On our breaking out our spend across some of the more shared services that were kind of just built into the ECS clusters before. So that's some of the things I like about it. But I would say those are just kind of cherries on top. The reasons, the other reasons that we made the move.
So swapping over to a little bit of the hot topic that everybody loves to talk about, apparently, which is Gen AI. So I'd love to know, you've been doing this for a couple of years. Gen AI, like we mentioned at the start of the video, is something that you guys utilize a bit, but where have you seen the whole Gen AI concept affect FinOps in your world?
It's kind of Grammarly was early adopters of these Gen AI API platforms.
Okay,
and this is a brand new concept to FinOps, and the way you kind of manage that is almost similar to how you manage capacity back in the old data center days. Whereas, especially early stages of these platforms, if you didn't have enough capacity, like if I didn't make sure Grammarly had enough capacity, we could have an outage. So it wasn't like a savings plan that, all right, where, you expect to go beyond it. It was like, if you don't have enough, it's going to have engineering impact. So that was kind of a new thing to me. As far as actually my, decisions here could actually create an outage if we don't have enough capacity. So that was one thing. And the other thing is just the pace of change. There was, in the beginning, there was really no documentation on the billing side. There was very little. It was kind of still getting figured out. Vendors, especially in the first year of this, and I started managing these things back in 2023. But the first probably 12 months, there was just constant new models, they were changing how the platforms work, new pricing. And I would say that has been probably the biggest impact, is just trying to keep up with all the changes. And then on top of that, you have Grammarly. We have very innovative engineering teams releasing new services, and they're trying to figure out, how much is this going to cost? Okay, well, you got to tell me the token consumption. All right, well, I got to figure out how to go count tokens. And so there was just a lot of these. I would say, luckily, Grammarly having AI background, counting tokens wasn't like an issue. It's something that we're already familiar with. But for companies that already aren't in this space or haven't even heard of a token, this is a big leap to start trying to calculate and measure these things, because tokens is actually what capacity utilization is measured on. So that it's pretty critical step, and what we're built on. So it's a pretty critical step in understanding like what things are going to cost. So I mean, I could probably go for a long time on all the changes and how it impacted, but it was the pace of change, the new terminology, the new way to manage, all kind of culminated with the release of these new API platforms.
And with the cost, you mentioned, there's the cost calculation piece, but there's also the ROI piece of that with all the pace of change with the new model. So who is calculating the ROI, or how are you measuring and optimizing the cost effectiveness of, a new model? So if you're going to go from one model to another, you can calculate the cost impact, number of tokens, whatever that happens to be, but how are you looking at the effectiveness of the change to the model and the ROI of that change?
So we have we have these linguist teams that can actually, and also a very mature experimentation framework that can measure the level of engagement as we kind of roll out experiments to live traffic. So Um, and that's one way to kind of understand the impact of these changes. I would say more specifically around optimization, uh, again, maybe running an experiment and it's 1% of traffic with this new model. And you're getting a sense of, okay, at 1% of traffic, this is consuming X amount of tokens, then, multiply that by 100, that's maybe a decent measurement of what it's going to be at that level. We usually probably go up to 5 or 10%. But that's how we really get a good sense of the actual consumption. And also on the other side of that, the effectiveness on the engagement. So, or is it more dismiss suggestions, more accept suggestions? And again, our linguists are pretty critical in just kind of measuring, the accuracy of these changes too, even before it goes to live traffic. On the optimization side, what I've seen is we had this big shiny new feature that wants to be rolled out, and they're saying it's going to be, tens of millions of tokens per minute, like huge. And then over time, as these experiments happen, they find ways to reduce it. I mean, we're talking to a quarter of what it was originally going to be. I've seen that happen over, a couple of experiments. A lot of those include, if something is maybe using these tokens in the background and it's updating daily and it's maybe creating some context based on daily usage, and it's doing this every single day, well, maybe we spread that out to a week. If we spread it out to a week, then that's going to, reduce a lot of the token consumption. So just really having those kind of that balance of, cost and benefit of, does it really need to be updated every day, or could it be a week and not have any impact on the quality here? So those are all kind of the balances we're making, or the teams really are making in those decisions. And that's where I've seen most of the optimizations come from.
Awesome. I mean, we had a question saying, what's been your biggest AI cost optimization play to date, which you kind of answer with kind of scaling with that. Any other ones? Otherwise, I'll throw it to Jeff.
Biggest one. I mean, the launch of Grammarly Go, which is now, I believe it's Assistant is the name now, but that was the biggest one. That was when we first launched, any kind of connection to OpenAI with, and giving the user the ability to prompt and make updates. So that was by far the biggest. And we've had, other like strategic suggestions is another one that actually is taking into account you're writing and thinking, okay, what's the intended audience here? And actually saying, hey, maybe you want to change this phrase in this way to have this level of impact on the audience. So it'll make, again, much more just contextual suggestions, a little deeper than maybe what some of the other suggestions do.
Yeah. There is we've got a couple of more questions in the chat. I'll throw to. I think this one's more of this is more of just a nice statement for you. My agent has Grammarly embedded. I've been training my agent for over a year. I find the Grammarly tool quite useful, quite helpful. Oh, nice. Go ahead. You can have that feedback for free. I've also got a couple more questions. Jesse from the start mentioned one-man FinOps team must have your hands full with you. And then also had a question, what are some tips to instill more cost ownership specifically with your engineers?
I think I'm probably being a bit redundant, but the bringing the information to them, like letting, the biggest issue I've seen is they just don't know. They don't, and that's not something they're initially going to seek out. So bringing the information to them, and then once that information is there, and this is the stage where I'm at, is, let's get the information to them. All right, tell them what to do with the information. What's the expectations with this information once they have it? So if it's a cost anomaly alert, do we expect them to go in and make a comment on what this is within 24 hours? So it's first getting the information to them and then setting expectations on what they should do with the information. And that second piece should probably be set at the manager or, a leader level. But first you kind of got to understand, what's coming in, what the alerts look like. And maybe that's going to be, it's going to be different depending on the team and part of the infra that they're managing.
Perfect. And we've got a couple more questions, so I'll keep running through these. Do you track your year-over-year growth of compute? And if so, how do you keep track of it?
Yes. When I'm assuming compute costs
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the but yeah, we do track that. It's growing as the business grows.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't be scared of growing compute costs if your business is growing. That's
Yes.
fine. I'm
Um,
assuming you use the native tools to kind of keep an eye on these things.
yeah, native tools. And our third party tool that we're using now is going to be a critical part of that. But yeah, native tools, do a pretty good job of keeping up with that. And then, obviously having this data and reporting historically helps with that too.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone is listening and they have not enabled their cost and use report, go and do it today because that will help you in the future to be able to figure out what's happened over time. And then the last one is the optional question, Josh, if you want to dive into this one. But assuming your workloads are running on EKS, you mentioned, where tagging can be applied at the pod level, how are you folks analyzing costs there? Are you kind of focusing it at the pod level, or do you ever dive into like task service? I'm saying these words like I really know what they mean, but
Namespace. So
a
namespace is
namespace, thank you.
namespace is the main thing we're on, and I would say it also depends on the agent or whatever tool you're using to break that information down. So we decided to go with a third party tool to kind of break that, and they're going to add annotation, the ability to annotate and label. That's going to be coming through the agent as well, and that can bring it down to another more granular level. The namespace, but I would say our main item is by namespace, and in cases where we have services that are shared across other features, we actually have like a namespace. Say it's a common API. So you have common API dash spell check, common API dash tone. So the namespaces actually break that down, and then you can, again, when you have anomalies or you're seeing what's the drivers are, you have a much more granular view. But yeah, and again, we've been using it 100% for migrated there for just over a month. So it's probably more we could do there, but right now it's namespace.
Just as a side thing, before we continue, someone said, "Chat, are they reading the chat or not really?" I'm reading everything, guys. I can see all the messages you're putting in there. So don't worry, I'm always watching.
Well, Josh, one of the things you had mentioned, this EKS migration and even some of your Gen AI features, the new models, you roll it out to maybe 1% for a new model, and then 5% you're doing the testing before going to full production. And I'm curious actually to get Steph's thought on what are the elements that customers should consider when they're deploying the infrastructure between their dev and their prod. So they've been doing all this testing. Now they actually need to get it into their production environments. What are some of those considerations aside from what Josh has mentioned of testing in pockets before rolling out?
Yeah, some of the things that I mentioned earlier, the things like multi-AZ for non-production, but there's a lot of these things that you can have in your non-production environments that, like I said, you enable for the production one. So if you're thinking about things like CloudWatch, don't enable all of the standard login class. You can enable the infrequent access one, which disables a bunch of features, but do you really need them? Checking your logging is a big thing. So one thing I see in the kind of other way around is that in non-production environments, people have debug on. And so they're producing tons and tons and tons of logs because they're trying to see what's going on in their application, trying to fix things, trying to develop. However, as soon as you move to production, you shouldn't really have debug on. You shouldn't be needing to debug any of your applications. It should be fine. So don't pay for kind of multiple times worth of your logs if you're not even kind of reading them regularly. The same for the size of instances. So don't be spinning up these huge instances if you don't need them, if you're just kind of testing up processes, and making sure that on your, do you have things like lifecycle policies for scheduling for your instances? So non-production, turn off on the weekend. Hopefully you're not working on the weekend. You shouldn't be. And turning them off hours and stuff like that is a great way to make sure. And one thing I also suggest is having all of those things set up by default in the development account so that they are done, so that no one has to worry about it. Have the instances tagged, like Josh was saying earlier, with infrastructure as code. So non-production instances get turned off at night and then no one has to do anything or worry about it. Hopefully that's some handy tips there, Jeff.
Yeah, and that's where I was wondering how much of all of those different decisions, how much you taking the decision out of the engineer's hand and saying, this is the default. If you're in a non-prod environment, this is how we're going to set it up to make it easier. And then it's going to be different once you move that to production.
Yeah. Making it a smooth kind of change.
Yeah. And I would say that's something that we've given a lot of autonomy to our engineers historically. And now we're in a stage, at our size and scale that we need to start kind of, standardizing some aspects of this, because it does make it difficult when somebody changes teams or somebody's doing on call that's new. I mean, it makes it really hard to kind of troubleshoot and know how to properly do things if every environment has different dashboards they're using for monitoring and all these things. So that is something we're working toward as well, standardizing, all of that more. Well, again, we want some autonomy, but for the things that it should be standardized and make sense to standardize, we're going to do it.
Perfect. So we've only got about 5 minutes left before we also got our Secrets Richard summary to come up in a bit to show all of the things. So if you join us kind of halfway through, you can see a summary of the full episode. But Josh, we've talked about AI right now, but you were on the working group for the FinOps Foundation about AI. Do you want to explain a little bit about what that covers? And I'll share the link to the working group documentation.
Sure, yeah. Sorry to jump, but yeah, I'm part of the AI working group. We did just recently release FinOps overview paper, which we've had, and I was actually less involved with this most recent one, but the previous papers were much more deeper and then this one, it probably in some cases a little too deep for a lot of FinOps practitioners. So this overview one takes a little higher level, still a lot of great content, and really just helps everybody who's just trying to kind of, where should I start in understanding this AI and my approaches, and maybe how it aligns to current cloudy things and how it doesn't align to those things. That it does a really good job of that. So that was just released. Other papers are in process as well. So always check out the space on FinOps.org for the AI working group every few weeks, and you may see some more papers.
And if you're in the DC area, Josh has spoken at multiple FinOps Foundation events out here as a fantastic speaker at those. So make sure to catch him if you're coming to one of the meetups they hold.
Yeah, keep an eye on the FinOps Foundation and join the community there if you want to continue yours. And don't forget to subscribe to these channels so you stay in our community to learn more about these things. Right, we're almost at Secret Richard, but I want to do very quickly, like one sentence-ish. How are you guys using AI like generally at work? I'm intrigued. Josh, how are you using it?
Helps me with my SQL queries, helps me with building, doing some coding, whether it's Python. But I would say for the most part, I'm using it outside of Grammarly is obviously something I'm using all the time. but outside of that, yeah, I do use AI for helping with SQL and coding in general right now.
Jeff, what about you?
In addition for writing, helping out for writing, it's really good at Excel formulas. So I was working on a file and had a fairly complicated formula, and I just asked how to do it, and it was perfect. Probably would have taken me a while to figure out the exact logic of it. So that was pretty cool to figure out.
Yeah, it's very handy. I'm using it a lot to write lots of cloud formation templates that just like, I want to try having seen what spend looks like on this, using Q to do that in my Visual Studio Code, which is very helpful. Okay, let's get into our Secret Richard. So today's summary, curiosity did not kill the cat for Grammarly. Go and ask questions and learn about what the teams are doing. C-suite buy-in helps grease the FinOps wheel to kind of keep that track moving. Grammarly were early AI adopters, but still test before scaling. That is great advice to always test what you're going to do. And check out the FinOps Foundation AI working group to learn more about this AI world. Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And very lastly, I love this whole thing. Steph reads the chat. I read the chat. Just to confirm to everybody watching, I read the chat. But that is going to be it from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have more episodes coming for a couple more weeks of streaming. We're about halfway through on this season. Next week, we're going to be asking how AWS or Amazon itself does FinOps. So join us then. Also, we're going to be posting and asking for questions for like a mailbag for that one. So if you have any questions on how you would love to know how Amazon itself does FinOps, then email at costoptimization@amazon.com, or any other questions when it comes to FinOps. Josh, any last closing statements before we finish up?
Just that thanks for having me. This has been a fun conversation. Time flew by. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks everyone.
Just say very quick. Time went. Jeff, anything else from you?
No, this was a fantastic conversation. I love hearing about, that golden path of instances. I wrote that term down. I'm going to probably be using that. I really like that concept.
I've noticed how Jeff is like writing through the episode, and I'm like, you know, it's recorded. For everyone's recorded. So who knows what you're back? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for me. I will see you all next week, and enjoy the rest of your week, and keep doing FinOps the way Gravity does it. It seems like a good way of doing it. Bye, guys. Thanks.